Football for me, it means people. Everyone who's involved for the right reasons. They want to play because they love the game. They want to be involved, and it brings connection between everyone. Whether it's standing on the sides, whether it's in the crowd, just watching and not playing.
And with football being for everyone, whether you're a coach, a player, an aspiring player for the future, someone seeking a scholarship, a teacher, a youth worker, a professional, a volunteer, someone seeking to get involved in the game, a volunteer parent, whether they're reflecting on their journey and how they can understand their grassroots team, an aspiring academy coach, an academy coach yourself, no matter what and no matter where you're listening, this podcast is really for you. On the Reflective Coach podcast, there are so many wonderful guests that feature on the podcast, whether this is former professionals, current professionals, and professionals of all backgrounds within the Coaching Insight series that really inspire, understand, support, and are reflective amongst this journey as they share their own insights, experiences, their own journey, their own reflections, strategies, insights, and other stories into the Reflective Coach podcast. Each week features a new guest, and each new guest brings something new to the podcast. I've been so lucky to have so many wonderful guests on, and you can really listen to all the episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and Podcast Addict, with continuous updates on Twitter and LinkedIn. By subscribing, commenting, following, engaging with all the posts amongst social media, you can really keep up to date with all the episodes.
No, not really, because I think, obviously my dad's not around anymore, but my mum's, we're going to see mum next week, actually. And she's so proud of me. She's proud about how far I've come in terms of what happened. She understands why the football career didn't develop into another 6 or 7 years, or maybe playing in the Premier League as opposed to second tier. So she understands it. She gets it. She's obviously religious like me. So we talk about absolutely everything in terms of that journey, because I was a lot better player. So obviously that daily training obviously developed me, got me fitter. So by the time I came back when I was 21, I knew straight away I was a different player. And that's when all the scouts started something. So in terms of playing at different clubs, and obviously the highest tier was second division when I signed for Stoke. But I suppose you talked about regrets earlier, and this is not necessarily regret, but it's a bit of a disappointment in terms of before I had that opportunity that we're talking about when I signed for Stoke. I think that some people might be surprised and all that, but I think this is partly to do with my faith again. But I think I wouldn't really change anything, because I think the experiences that I've had in life, obviously the fact that I've had a half decent football career, so I've had great experiences there. Yes, the trauma and adversity of the addiction. Yes, the falling out with friends and stuff. My family stayed with me anyway. Becoming an author, that was ridiculous. I don't know where that came from.
How are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. All good.
Good. Nice to see you.
Yes, finally, Luke.
Yes, definitely, because very busy man, lots ongoings, and here, there, and everywhere, mate.
Yeah, I know there is a lot going on, to be honest. Yeah, which is good. But I'm going for, as you know, I think I told you, I'm going for a Christmas break on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
A much needed break.
Yeah.
So as much as it is good to be busy then in terms of for the business, obviously to share the story, the message, etc. On like that personal level, do you like to be like really busy whereby, 9 o'clock rolls around, you're like, yeah, that day's been achieved today because I've maximised so much of it?
Yeah, that kind of mentality. I like to know that there's been a productive day in some way. It could be a book, even the smallest thing of booking of a workshop. Yeah, that's the job done. I just like to know there's something productive come out of a day.
And typically over that week then, how many workshops do you deliver?
Depends, because for instance, as an example, we've got this non-league project, which we started about 3 months ago. But because of the way we do our marketing, we connect with a lot of people. So we've had this FA agency contact us and wanted 12 clubs within 4 weeks. So the guys have been out and about all around England, the Midlands, of Yorkshire, or Manchester, doing 12 clubs. So I think they finished the last one on the 30th of November. Yeah, so we can get things like that where we've just got to go and bang out a load of workshops because it's part of an agreement with someone.
That's good. I think it's definitely that basis is needed for it, and the more that you can get out there, the more that you can work with them, even better, especially to spread that message, mate.
Yeah, yeah, and I think obviously I started in non-league football as we might talk about later, but yeah, so I know the non-league scene and I know the non-league background, so that was good that we got that non-league project off the ground.
Absolutely. Well, this podcast episode's all around you. It's your story. It's your founding
Yeah.
business. It's your impact and what you want to get out of it. And, it is centered around everything that you've experienced in life, but only what you're doing now as well plays a big part of that. So any way you want to shape it, any direction, any route, it's all down to you, and let me facilitate as best as possible. But it is great to have you on. And, I've done some reading on the book as well, and obviously listened to the interviews. And it was such a great, story in terms of that progression in life, in terms of what you've had, despite how difficult it has been at times, but what you've come through to where you are and what you're doing, that is an incredible achievement in itself.
Yeah, I think that's probably why my story can be inspirational to others, and the main thing for me is about giving people hope, because people keep asking me about, oh, you lost this, you lost that, the bankruptcy, the houses, the car, the finance, finishing football early, relationship, everything, and how do you not get to that point where you've lost complete hope, and obviously we know what the next level is, but unfortunately I never got to that next level. Very, very fortunate.
Well, as I said, the story is all yours, and it's going to take us through, that stepping stage between where you started to where you're currently at now, and taking us through those different routes. So, if you were to give an introduction to yourself and that background in terms of how you'd like to portray it and give that perception of what you'd like to be included, how would you deliver that?
Well, my background, do you want me to give a background of when it started and what the journey? But I just want, when I tell my story, I just want people to know, obviously, where I am now is obviously founder and CEO of Red Card Gambling Sport Project, which is obviously our organisation for education, awareness, prevention, gambling harm. So that's what I do today. That's what I'm passionate about. That's the business. But in the past life of professional football, I need to get my story across to know that, and it doesn't necessarily, mean just because I was footballer. Because obviously, as we know, anybody from any kind of background, gender, status, ethnicity, whatever, it doesn't matter the fact that I was a footballer. I just happened to be a footballer when I went through the height of the addiction. So, going through that journey is important, because obviously, I'm still involved in certain football aspects of the industry, and obviously I understand that there's players out there still struggling with gambling in the football world. But in the wider society, I need to keep raising awareness of gambling harms, and that's what I want to portray in the story. And obviously, growing up in Coventry, what it was like growing up in Coventry as opposed to moving to London. And then obviously a big in between all that is obviously my personal, I suppose, personal sort of intervention, which is basically obviously my faith and Christian faith, which has a part to play in how I got to where I am today, in my opinion. But obviously, I respect everybody's faith and religions, but it's something that's part of me and works for me in terms of helping me on my journey.
Of course, and it plays a big part. Obviously, becoming a professional footballer, that story that you had around it, those experiences, because you're earning the money, you've got that lifestyle, as said in the book, where you're going out to nightclubs, you know some of the names, you're out there, and suddenly you're starting to become recognised. You're into cars from a very young age, whereby you're travelling, picking up a car, even without a licence, without insurance, starting to get that police recognition. And then that status as a typical footballer starts to build even before you acquired that scholarship and that status in the youth academy, etc. But even just taking back to that and that lifestyle, surrounded by 6 siblings, I believe it is, the very different lifestyles back then, which we're still seeing a big part of right now. In terms of that racial abuse and what comes through, the impacts of gambling. It'd be impossible to tell this story, I think, without the part of football, which is, without football you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now. For example, you could be, but without that huge background of that personal experience of what you've endeavoured.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think that journey from being at Bristol City and getting released and being crushed, the dream being crushed, and then getting that second opportunity, so I think, obviously football is a big, massive part of the journey, because without going into football, probably wouldn't have happened, because that was the height of the addiction. That's where the addiction properly kicked in professional football. So who knows what would happen if I didn't turn professional football? Yeah.
Absolutely. And, when I think about it, for any parent, for the fact that you have become a professional footballer, something which they always supported you in doing, and I know that your brother did as well, but, when they get to see that, that's like an achievement. You're going, yeah, my son did make it professional and they have attained that status and he did play at certain levels and has that behind him. But obviously, as you say, you didn't achieve that next step, that next level as you wanted. And, there were impacts from that. But as much as there is that achievement for your parents, for your family, do you feel that in any way? And I know it's, we try to switch off from regrets at points, but do you ever feel that you've let them down from what you didn't achieve in your career in perspective?
No, not really, because I think, obviously my dad's not around anymore, but my mum's, we're going to see mum next week actually. And she's so proud of me. She's proud about how far I've come in terms of what happened. She understands why the football career didn't develop into another 6 or 7 years, or maybe playing in the Premier League as opposed to the second tier. So she understands it. She gets it. She's obviously religious like me. So we talk about absolutely everything in terms of that journey, because obviously there was countless times where she was borrowing me money. So she understands it and gets it. And I think, the fact that she's been to games, she was at Wembley with Stoke and that, she's experienced the football world. She knows, and my dad as well, because my dad drove me absolutely everywhere. So he was behind the whole family and me and my brother for all our lives. So they know how passionate we were about being footballers. And that goes right to the school days in terms of getting us our boots and kits and just looking after us and making sure that we've got, the ammunition to actually try to be a footballer. So the fact that I achieved the one thing I always say is that regardless of what happened in life, in terms of the addiction, in terms of the trauma, adversity, whatever you want to call it, I've been through, the simple fact is that I can always turn around to my grandkids and my nephews and my daughter and say, well, I did achieve my boyhood dream, which is become a professional footballer. So that can never be changed. So I think that's something, I'm really proud of. I think it was about, off the top of my head, about 215 league appearances in all the games. So it's not that bad. It should have been 400 or 500. But yeah, but as you said, I've actually achieved my boyhood dream, which is what I wanted to do.
Being an educator myself and working with quite deprived individuals at a young age in a secondary, trying to have a lot of context in them when I try to approach it because of the gambling addiction support and the different type of communities that can be tapped into and what might be adversely available to accessing gambling because of their backgrounds. From me trying to approach that from that sense, when I look and speak to them, they're like, oh, well, I've achieved this, but it's not really an achievement because I've let my parents down or I've not achieved this and there. And I'm like, well, actually, that's quite a huge achievement within itself for you just to get that one. And then you've done this as well. So you've actually done more than you believe you have. And therefore, to say that you have been a professional footballer is a huge achievement, even if you didn't get to those next steps. And especially when you look at the numbers and players who come through, for those who actually become a professional is very, very low. So to be in that category, mate, one achievement.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of, the percentages of young players that come through. I mean, I worked at Tottenham's training ground for a couple of years when it first opened, 2012. And, I remember like release night, being I was a security liaison officer, and release night comes where parents could turn up and start arguing with the coaches about their son being released and all that. And so I just say to them, well, they're not all going to make it. It's out of 20 scholars, there might be 2 at the most that might get a pro contract. So, yeah, exactly. The percentages are very, very low in terms of who actually gets offered a professional contract, yeah.
And, I know that you were close to your brother when you came through and that, you were looking up to him as you would, had the opportunities because he linked you up and set you up on that pathway. But you have your own journey in yourself as Tony Kelly. And, sometimes it can be hard to be branded by a brush when you've got siblings and other family members involved. But you stand alone as you are. But when you were up and coming and you did look at your brother and you had that relationship with him, and when he was at certain levels, in and around those managers, those contacts, etc., did you look at the lavish lifestyle, or did you look at going, right, I can work hard and achieve this, and then the lavish lifestyle will come? What was sort of the push factor to try and achieve the highest factor or the lavish lifestyle and then try and see what football would come of it at that time?
Yeah, and that's a good question. And it's very easy to answer for me because all I had in my head, I remember going down to Eastville, Bristol Rovers Stadium to watch my brother. And I remember the crowd, I remember the size of the stadium, just the ambience of a whole professional football stadium. I'm just thinking to myself, God, I'd love to be in that arena. So in terms of what comes with that, it didn't really enter my head. All I wanted to do was be in that arena and being able to play in front of thousands of people. Yeah, and that's one of the things that drove me, because obviously Errington, you know, he went on to Peterborough, as you know, they have a legend at Peterborough, and he down London Road I've been many a times, and yeah, just being able to see, you know, your own sibling in the flesh doing what he loves best, and then obviously, you know, me hoping that one day I'll get an opportunity.
And that opportunity did come, and it did thrive for you. And there were some, great experiences. When you look at the type of clubs, yes, you did drop down to certain clubs and levels. But when you look at some of the clubs, Bristol City, Stoke City, Hull City, Cardiff, Bury, Leyton Orient. Wow, what an array of clubs to have amongst the fold of clubs, including Stratford Town, for example. I know as one of the other clubs you played for. But that is just a huge significance to have those experiences at the levels that you did have.
Yeah, and I think I got a taste. I got a taste of, you know, not exactly on the same level, but a taste of professional football when I went to Sweden. So I think it was 19 or 20 when I went to Sweden, and that 8 months in Sweden, what they call the second division, which is the one down from the Allsvenskan, and I love Sweden, and obviously I'm training every day, so it's, you know, it is professional football, but in terms of the standard, it's probably the conference. So that taste of training every day, that sort of gave me appetite to say, you know, this is what it's like then as a full-time professional, training every single day, getting up in the morning, etc. So by the time I come back, I was a lot better player. So obviously that daily training obviously developed me, got me fitter. So by the time I came back when I was 21, yeah, I knew straight away I was a different player, and that's when all scouts started something. So in terms of playing at different clubs, and obviously the highest tier was second division when I signed for Stoke. But I suppose you talked about regrets earlier, and this is not necessarily regret, but it's a bit of a disappointment in terms of before I had that opportunity that we're talking about when I signed for Stoke. I had the opportunity where there was a possibility that I was going to sign for Southampton in the first division, and when, you know, Chris Nicholl and myself spoke, and then Chris Nicholl and St Albans City talked, obviously the transfer fee couldn't be agreed. But being, you know, you say about having these players around you, and just being around players with Shearer and Matt Letizia, for instance, training with them is just an eye opener. So yeah, it's a shame that didn't go through. But as you know, the second opportunity came by, and yeah, and I was just fortunate and blessed to be able to have that opportunity to play in the second division with Stoke. And that was an amazing day when I got that phone call.
I can imagine, and certainly one opportunity and a great club to be part of, especially, where they're at and where they've been in recent years, but to still be part of that history and where you're at, playing for them and contributing can forge where they've got to at that point. But to have that experience, and it is hard because we do look back and go, should we have these regrets? Should we not have these regrets? Do they sort of give us a level that we can follow, give us a lesson whereby we can ground ourselves to? And then it's quite easy to go, yeah, let's switch off from it because we've been gone. We can't go back and change it. It's impossible. But there is a sort of fondness of going, yeah, I had that opportunity to do so. And again, it's right there for what has been presented in terms of that quality which was coming about. But it's hard because as much as opportunities come and go, so do people and so do life and experiences. And there are many people that you've probably been surrounded by throughout your life who are quite happy to be around you, quite happy to be part of the entourage, quite happy to experience what you've been through and, share the highs with you. But it doesn't always necessarily mean as they're through the highs, they're there through the lows. And that can be some of the most difficult things, especially when I work with some of the young people that I work with. They start to rely on certain people, then those people come and go. So when you have been through what you have been through, and I know you touched upon it in one element in terms of a relationship, which I felt a huge fondness when I was reading the book, and I was like, he still thinks about this one person, he still mentions this young girlfriend. I'm like, mate, I love that. And I think that's so special. But people do come and go, mate, and that can be really hard to deal with within life, especially through, as you say, maybe addiction, that trauma and experiences that you have had.
Yeah. I think it's more for me, it's more I generally surrounded myself. I've been one of them people that surround myself with sort of good people and close friends. I wasn't really one of them that had like 8, 9, 10 people around me all the time. Yeah, throughout the football world, you get, as you point out, a little hangers on now and again that are around for the drinks and the parties and all that stuff. But in terms of close, genuine friends, I've always had close, genuine friends, and they have stayed with me, you know, to this day. But there's also been one or two where, due to the, you know, obviously the lies and the deceit, you know, along that gambling addiction journey, that have obviously, you know, fallen away. So I've lost, you know, probably 3 or 4 really good friends that, you know, unfortunately I let down. So that can be sad, because there were some really good people that were in my life that unfortunately are not now, due to what I was going through. As I said, when there's only so much lies and deceit that some people can take, you let people down and betray them. So that's happened. I have to hold my hand up to that and own that. And in terms of, you know, the lady you're talking about, I think one of the reasons why, you know, she's never really judged me. She's understood. Obviously, she is my daughter's mother. Yeah, she's never, all the stuff that we've been through together, she's never, you know, like fallen out with big time. They want to speak to you again, blah blah blah. She's been she's been a bit of a rock, and that's why I hold in high esteem. And today we're best friends. And yeah, she's been, I think, because we met so young, she's been through the whole journey, the whole football world journey, and everything, the whole addiction world. So she gets it, she understands it, and has never really judged me on it. Yeah.
I think that's so special as well, and to see it and to still hold you in that high regard in each other, and to completely understand and respect that. But when you're falling out with certain people and you say they're no longer part of your life, can it be really difficult to try and reach out to those, to rebuild those sort of relationships you once had? Or is it just easier to, as you say, have that ownership over it and accept it for the fact of it is where it is now and that's what it was?
Yeah, I'd say a bit of both, because it's hard. There's one or two where I thought, you know, just leave it. What happened, happened. It is what it is, and it's past. Don't revisit that, really. And then there's one or two where I've tried to reach out, because whether they've been more closer or I've got certain memories, and I'll send a message. There's one or two over the years on social media where I've sent a message and say, you know, I don't know if you're aware of what I've been through or what I went through. I might send them a link or something, to try and get them just to understand, you know, what I went through and why things happened. You know, I remember I had to give an explanation to an old lady friend, on Facebook. This is probably about 4 years ago, because the post came out about obviously the work I'm doing, etc. And a message came back from her, and it was a really, really strange one to tackle, because she said something along the lines of, "Oh, doing great now, yeah. Does that mean that I can have the, whatever it was, I can't remember the figure, it might have been 300, 400 pounds or something. Can I have my 300 or 400 pound back now?" Yeah, and when I read that, I stopped. I thought, well, how do I tackle this? And then that's when I reached out to her and said, "Oh, you know, obviously, you know, apology, etc. But you know what I do now. You know my story now. You know what I've been through. So obviously, I had an illness, which was a serious, severe addiction. So I'd appreciate it if you could try and understand what I've been through, and not just talk about getting money back and all that." And that's all I was trying to get across to her. But yeah, she didn't get it. I was hoping that she'd understand that. Yeah, she would be one of many people that were impacted by my gambling. Yeah.
And it can be hard when those people don't understand the addiction which you've gone through or what you have experienced and where you're currently at now, but to not try to, you know, have that empathy in terms of that approach, in terms of that mindset that you had and what you're currently going through.
Yeah. And I've had other messages from people that were impacted by my journey, that were just really congratulations on where I've been and how I've come through it. So I've had a bit of both. Yeah.
And so, if you had, say, a Pandora's box and you had the opportunity to delve into it, would you completely go back and reshape and reform your playing career? Or would it be to continue to have those experiences which you've had, but to open up the social box and to maybe have those reforms of those relationships which you're now missing or lack?
I think that some people might be surprised and all that, but I think this is partly to do with, you know, my faith again. But I think I wouldn't really change anything, because I think the experiences that I've had in life, obviously the fact that I've had a half decent football career, so I've had great experiences there. Yes, the trauma and adversity of the addiction. Yes, the falling out with friends and stuff. My family stayed with me anyway. Becoming an author, that was ridiculous. I don't know where that came from. You know, becoming a CEO, I haven't got no degrees or anything. So when I think back, I say to myself, well, all these things have happened for a reason, and that's my full belief that I had to go through this journey to get to where I am today, and that's a strong belief that I have, and that's why, obviously I was baptized in 2017, and that's why this journey is going to continue, because these are the building blocks and these are the things that are put in place for me. So I've had to go through that to get to here, to get to this point. So I wouldn't change anything, because I think one of the most important things for me, in terms of you've read the book and you've read the reckless things I've done. So I think when I think about who I am today as an individual and as a person, then yeah, I'm a much happier person today and a much better person than I was back then. So I think that's so important for me.
I think that's, again, as you said there, to be the most important aspect there is that you are happier considering the experiences you've gone through, and maybe looking back and going, yeah, I was a pro footballer, yeah, I had access to this lifestyle, yeah, I knew these people, but to be away from that, but to be at your prime happiest, that is, again, a huge achievement in itself and an essence of life. And, I'm very Catholic based, and therefore my religion guides a lot of the way I think and shape and have those relationships. And I'm like, do I want to access this relationship because it doesn't hit the principles or foundations of what I'm taught in my religion? And people find that difficult to sort of engage with. But when that's your guiding principle, especially through some of the traumas that you've experienced, that is sort of the light that guides you, which a lot of people think, what religion, what's that? Oh, that's fake. And that can be quite hard then to sort of accept or take on. But if we're so open in the mindsets that we have, we could just adapt to it and go, yeah, we've got the empathy to understand that. And it's a shame that you don't understand it and have that empathy. But this is what guides me, and this is the foundations where I'm currently at, which leads to my happiness, and as to why I'm sharing my story.
Yeah, and I've always said, I did a talk last week in the local church, actually, it was in Wales, but just getting to people to understand that whatever it is that helps people, whatever it is that helps people cope with certain situations in life and challenges, whatever it is to help them to get them support, and makes them feel a certain way, that could be anything. It doesn't have to be religion. So my daughter's more spiritual. Others are more religious. Others might think of another higher power, for instance. So it's all about individual, what works for you, and what works for me is Christianity. So yeah, that's why I always say that I respect everyone's religions and faiths, but this is what works for me, and I feel it, and I keep going back to them and pinching myself when I say that, because if you go back to 2014 and go in public on BBC Breakfast, we will be shortly 10 years later. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what was going to happen. There was no red card born. There was no nothing, but I don't know no idea what the future held. So for things to have happened the way they have, and to write a second book and then to run the company and to go around the country educating people, etc., I never thought that was possible. But anything's possible, in my opinion, when I have complete 100% faith and belief in my God.
I love that, and I'm completely on board with that, and I love that sort of quote as the takeaway there and reflect upon. But I know that you're delivering workshops, you're delivering the work that you are, you've set up the business for what it is. The whole point is the gambling support, to raise that awareness, to do workshops, to access that ability to support in others. But whilst you were a footballer, and yes, it was prior to where things are now, did you have that financial support or that financial guidance at any point of the football clubs when you came through, or what you experienced when you were coming through?
No. The only thing that I remember was I know that there was mention of the PFA Benevolent Fund, and there was also talk about, I think someone would come in, I don't know, once every 6 months, something, to talk to us about players' pensions. So these are one or two things that I remember, but I was obviously, me going through the addiction, I wasn't really interested in putting money away. But I think there wasn't a lot of education then. There wasn't, financial advisors coming in regular chats about this is what you should do with your money, invest your money in this way, etc. So there wasn't a lot of that, but there was one or two things that the PFA put in place in terms of talking about players with their pensions. So yeah, and I remember, the only thing I remember about the Benevolent Fund is taking money out of it to pay the bloody debts off. That's all I remember about the players' Benevolent Fund.
And do you believe if you had more support or more guidance back then, it may have prevented or reduced the amount of gambling that you accessed, or the way that you manage your money, maybe to a more positive light than what you've experienced?
The truth is no, to be honest. I think, when you go on a gambling journey and then it spirals and then it becomes a compulsion and it becomes something that you want to do on a daily basis. And, I mean, I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a clinical professional. So, but we've talked a lot with people about how we're wired up and about the dopamine rush and about, genetics, the biological side of addictions, the neuroscience. It just gets deeper and deeper. So, if it doesn't really matter, because there was times where I did have a lot of money. There was times where the signing on fees and stuff, I did have a lot of money at times. But it didn't stop the addiction, because addiction is something that is very, very difficult just to turn around or wake up in the morning and say, I want to stop this. Because an addiction is addiction. It's a mental health disorder. It's a gambling disorder. And as I said, the dopamine rush that's involved with it makes you want to continue doing something that you enjoy. Because the strange thing about gambling addiction, and it's probably the same with most addictions, whether you're a drinker or whether you're going shopping or whether it's sex, you enjoy these things. So, when I'm on the way to the casino, I'm actually looking forward to it. Even I might be 10 grand in debt or whatever, but I might have 5 grand in my pocket looking forward to it. It's something that I enjoy participating in, which is weird when you're losing X amount of money. So I don't think any kind of financial chats or anything. Maybe there should have been something in place, because I know my family talked to me a lot about putting money away. So I think there could have been ways to manage my money whereby you pay your bills, you still have some money to gamble or whatever, but there's a certain amount of money that is put away every month for a rainy day. But again, if I'm getting involved in the gambling, then all I'm going to do is try and access that money. It's as simple as that, because you will access all avenues of borrowing. It's as simple as that.
And just touching upon that then, whereas you said that you could have put money away and have that management and control from a family aspect, when you have kids and when it comes to their money, when they were earning money and where they currently still are, do you have that sort of compulsion, that or sort of control or mindset where you want to get in and manage, or to make sure that they are wholesome in the way that they look at it, or is it more of crack on?
My daughter, if she was listening now, she'll tell you that I do her head in. I literally do her head in, because I'm always talking to her about money. I'm always talking to her about not getting into debt. I'm always talking about not taking out loans. I'm always talking about, maybe have one credit card. So I'm on to her all the time, probably for the last 10 years, about money management, because I know what debt looks like. And I don't want her to be growing up in serious debt, because not only is it going to be problems in terms of getting a place, but obviously mental health as well. So, thank God she's managed to be really, really good. She's managed to get herself to a great position in terms of, next account manager. She's got a massive job, and she does look up. She'll be on holiday with me next week. So I'll give her a bit of credit. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago, she's 25 now, but she wouldn't be having money. She wouldn't have money to go on holiday. But now she doesn't even ask me for money for holiday. She's got her own money. So she's coming to the Caribbean with us next week, and she looks after her money now. And I think I'm really proud of that, because, we did talk a lot over the years about money. And as I said, only because, I wanted to understand what I've been through and how easy it is to get into debt. And also, from a balance point of view in terms of men and women gambling today. Remember, it's a different landscape now. I don't know if she's going to get involved in gambling and bingo and whatever, and apps or whatever, because there's tens of thousands of women that do.
And when it comes to that, there's even more access to it from more than ever, because, when you look at types of like Bitcoin, AI, and how that is going to evolve in the technological landscape in itself today, there's even more access, risk, and vulnerability to losing your money even quicker than it was before.
Yeah. The opportunities now, and as you said, the accessibility to accessing, any kind, various different forms of gambling. That's the scary bit. When we talk to young people about, general gambling and gambling apps and mainstream gambling, but we also talked about gaming and, and as you said, crypto, Bitcoin, it goes on, and there's probably going to be more, like you say, more sort of different forms of gambling. But there'll be forms of gambling that a lot of young people will understand. Us old codgers might not get it, but they'll understand all that environment. They'll understand that, that platform about, sign up for this and sign up for that. But, like we said, we had a chat, there's a couple of slides in the workshop where we talk about crypto and where, it's a volatile market, and but they get it. They understand everything about it. They know because, there's, I can't remember how many, 2 million, whatever it is, people that are on crypto now in the UK, but it's the bottom line, what we try to explain to them, whether it's, crypto gambling or whether it's gaming and you're buying FIFA packs or whatever it is. The simple fact is that, like you said, there's a risk and reward element. So, it's going to go one way and you can lose a hell of a lot of money if you're investing in stuff.
Absolutely, and it's something as simple as, we got a 6 or 7-year-old, and I like that because it's so easy to say FIFA, and it's so, people might laugh you off, oh, what do you mean FIFA? But it is, if a young 6-year-old is thinking about his squad management, and he's going, oh, I can buy him for 400, or I'll sell him for 600, bang, for already that, they've got a compulsion of earning money and going, right, I can do that in real life, oh, I've got money available, and what does it teach them? It goes, oh, as soon as your money is readily available, you can spend it as quick as possible. So there is little forms of that, and I know there was a study on that years ago, and it did come up on the news, and I think that's such an important concept for any sort of consideration of listener. But when you first started gambling, how old were you? How did you access it, and why? What drawn you into gambling at the first stop without experiencing it before?
Excuse me, there was a time, I don't know if I mentioned it, but when I must have been about 13, 14 in Coventry, where we used to play in the bicycle sheds with only like 5p and 10p 3-card bag. So obviously I didn't know that's a form of gambling. We're still playing 5 and 10p's and 2p's and pennies as well. But I didn't really think about that, and that was sort of erased from my mind. So I hadn't really talked about that really. But yeah, when I was about 13, I think. But when I moved to London, that was when it all changed, because obviously I was released from Bristol City, went back to Coventry, tail between my legs, faced my mates and all that. And my sister moved to London, so she said, look, why don't you just have a change of lifestyle completely, come out of Coventry, because there's a lot going on, no employment, racism, skinheads, all that stuff was going on. So I thought, let me just get out of here. And I still had a burning desire to be a footballer. We said there might be more opportunities in London. So we moved to Dulwich, South East London, and across the road was Dulwich Hamlet. And I think that's where, that's where it definitely all started, because obviously I started to, I wanted, we talk about different reasons why people gamble, and mine was, yes, the financial reward, but more about fitting in, peer pressure. There was older guys there, the Alan Pardew's and the Andy Grays, older guys there that, I'm not saying them two in particular, but they were older guys and senior players. And when I say senior players, I'm talking 21, 22. And they were having bets across the road at Mecca Bookmakers. And I had to find a way of fitting in, because I was really, really shy, coming from the city to the big lights. And I don't know if you'll understand this, but London 30, 35 years ago, to someone from Coventry, for instance, as a 17, 18-year-old going to there, all my mates are saying, wow, he's going to London. London was the big lights. London was one of the big cities, not like it is now. Everyone go drive through their 10 a penny, innit?
Yeah.
So, but it was the proper London then. And so, I had to fit in, feeling comfortable, feeling a sense of belonging. So that's what I did. There's about 5 or 6 I used to put bets on before the match on a Saturday. And that's how I sort of introduced myself to the football coupons, betting. And that's how it really started.
And then it only started to get worse from there, realistically, because when you look at what you went through and the outcomes in terms of the loss of the house, the breakup of the relationship, 300k loss plus, the fallouts of people, the trauma, the experience, the addiction, it ended up being a spiraling road, which ended up being quite quick in how you spiral from it.
Yeah, and the thing is, there are, obviously there's people around today that have a bet from time to time, they'll never encounter gambling harm, doing moderately, whatever. But unfortunately, for some of us, it just becomes a compulsion. It just becomes, something that you can't stop. And I think once you start losing money, once you start borrowing money to gamble, then it becomes this cycle where you're chasing. So if I lose, a week's wages, I've got to get a sub from work. That's going to come back out of wages. I've got to try and make it up. So you're always constantly chasing something. And slowly but surely, you end up being in debt. You end up one of the things that really happens a lot as you go along on the chase journey is the fact that your outlays will be bigger because you're trying to recoup a certain amount of money, and then obviously your losses get bigger and the hole gets deeper. So yeah, it's a real, you know, sad spiral that continues. And so yeah, that's eventually what I started to do was first, you know, take money out of my wages, then borrow money, then take out loans, and then as I mentioned it earlier, eventually, you know, when you're going on that gambling journey, eventually when you're in serious proper debt, you will exhaust all avenues of borrowing, and that will be friends and family and obviously other sources of credit. And that's just that journey that you go on. That's what gamblers do.
And when you had that compulsion, that addiction, that sort of commitment to it, when you were putting on bets, were you typically putting on, you know, 3, 4 every day? Was it every day? How frequent were you in doing that?
Yeah, it was every day. It was every day. Obviously, the bookies weren't open as late back then. Things about 6 o'clock. Would open around 10. When I got into football, it was all about, you know, because obviously from 18 to 21, 22, I've accumulated a bit of debt. It was a problem, but I wouldn't say it was an addiction until I actually signed for Stoke. Yes, obviously a lot more money. And then basically once I, you know, started in the professional football world, it was after training would be the bookmakers, up to a certain till they close, and then obviously in the evenings it was the casino. So it was always those two where all my big losses would come on a daily basis. If it's a day off, we used to have Wednesdays off. Sometimes I'd go back to London where my missus was, but sometimes I'd say to her, "Oh, we've got to train," but we wouldn't be training. I'd just be in the bookies. Yeah, so all this slowly but surely the lights and the C cup start coming into play. I might have to go back on a Saturday after a home match and drive back to London, stay with the missus for the weekend, and then again, and the excuse always call us in for training Sunday, and I can't, but I'm in the casino all Saturday night. You know, so yeah, it just takes over. It consumes you. It literally consumes you once you start becoming an addict. Once you start depending on it. So yeah, it's more or less every day.
And when it did consume you and you got into that bigger hole, you know,
Mm.
obviously the effect of a relationship and the effect of the money. But when you look at, say, buying a car, for example, you could go, right, I want this nice car. It cost me about 8 grand. I might commit to the next 5 years of paying this off on a HPI. Therefore, you've already created debt and you've got yourself a 5 year commitment. And the same could be with a house, for example. But where you've got an grand car, it's a lot of money, 8 grand, right? Especially if it's sat in front of you. But it's also not a lot of money in respect of being 300 grand in debt. So it's quite easy to go, right, we can work out a 5 year plan for this payment. I can meet these payments. I can pay that off in 5 years, for example. But for 300 grand, that's quite a lot of money substantially to be in debt and to try and recover and pay that back. And so when it comes to that recovery, trying to give that money back or making sure you're on course to do so, was that a really difficult place for you to be in terms of how you were setting that up and how you were in that situation of experiencing it, whereby others didn't have that maybe empathy or understanding, but you knew at the end of the day this hole was yours and you had to live with it, and that's what was surrounding you?
Yeah, and I think the most important thing for me when I accumulated so much debt was that deep down I knew I'm never going to be able to get rid of this debt. So the stresses that come with that, the anxiety that comes with that, in terms of, you know, continued letters, continued phone calls, lots of visits of bailiffs, worrying about where the car's going to be repossessed, all these things that are going on around in your head in terms of serious financial harm. I just was praying and hoping for a way out where I could get rid of all this debt, because obviously, you know, it doesn't matter if I'm gambling every day. I'm not going to win 300 grand. I'm not going to win 100 grand. So it's just not going to happen. So yeah, that was difficult to live with. And obviously it causes other issues within my life, obviously with the relationship, you know, letting my daughter down, letting my partner down in terms of holidays, in terms of, you know, routine trips, just everything in terms of general daily basis, how you live your life. There's just so much impact when it comes to finance, because, you know, I couldn't afford hardly anything. So yeah, I had to live with that. And that was a real struggle in terms of living with serious debt until eventually, you know, obviously way further down the line, but eventually the opportunity came to get rid of that £192,000 for the bankruptcy.
And that can be hard then once you've experienced bankruptcy in itself, and to be in that situation. And you know, a lot of people can sort of look at it and go, oh, you've been in bankruptcy. And certainly beyond the years before where we're at now, and you know, there was that sort of limelight on it to not try and be in that situation, and you are the worst of the worst in society in terms of that financial status which you hold. And it can be difficult to admit to that and go, yeah, okay, I'm going to sign that away, I'm going to put myself in this position. But it's a catch-22 situation, because you either sign bankruptcy and trying to look for a light and a way out and try and progress out of it, or you sit with a 300 grand debt knowing, oh fuck, what am I going to do here, for example?
Yeah, and I think that there was still a bit of is a bit of a taboo word when it probably still is a little bit now. There's that shame element to it about people going bankrupt. But I spoke to my family and my sister, and we felt that this was an opportunity just to try and rebuild. Because obviously being in that serious debt was causing mental health issues as well. Sleepless nights. I think sleepless nights is horrible in terms of getting no sleep and getting up for training. So yeah, I think the decision was made that here's an opportunity to try and get rid at least part of the trauma that I'm going through. You know, it's not going to get rid of everything. I'm still going to be gambling probably when this bankruptcy goes through. But the good thing is that I won't have access to funds like I had before. So I think the limit was about £500 that you could get once the bankruptcy went through. And obviously, in terms of a mental health and feeling, you know, the less stress, that's what was taken away. So I'm not to worry about less and bailiffs and all the rest of it. So yeah, it was a start. So I'd say it was the start of the recovery, the bankruptcy, because there was a couple of things that happened in the same year.
And when it comes down to it, and I know you touch upon this within the workshops as well, and you can be affected socially, mentally, physically. And when it comes down to it, there is that mental sort of consideration, that aspect. And that hole can be the worst of the worst, because you're like, right, how can I find a way out? What is the way out? If I can't make these payments, if I can't, declare this, I can't do that, I've got no way out. You end up thinking, right, what is my only exit route? How can I relieve myself of stress? How can I relieve myself of this entire situation? How can I get out? And that might lead to suicidal thoughts and the worst of the worst and the deep.
Yeah.
And did that ever really cross your mind when that came about in that situation for you?
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think I was very lucky that I had family support. So I can't imagine what it's like going through something like that on your own without any family support. And I think for me, without all that family support, you know, I could have easily gone that way in terms of lost hope, in terms of I'm never going to get out of this. This is how I don't want to feel anymore every single day, 24/7. So yeah, people ask me about, did it get to the point of no return, what I call, and didn't, crossing that line. But the only thing that I thought of in terms of how am I going to get out of this was, and I think it's in the book anyway, but I did an article a couple of years ago in the paper where me and my brother sat up and talked about robbing a bank. Now, you know, where gambling addiction can take you is just absolutely ridiculous. It's just crazy, the things that you could end up doing. Because obviously, when you've exhausted all avenues of borrowing, then one of the next steps is going to be crime. And we have, with our team's built on lived experience, and one of our team members has been to prison for theft of thousands. So easily done when you're on that slippery slope. So for me, we talked about robbing a bank. We even went down there to have a recce, and who's going to be going in the morning, what time it opens, how are we going to do it, all these things, planning it, thinking ahead. I used to be obsessed with crime watching. So me and my brother watching crime watching, thinking, is that easy? So that's the kind of mentality we had and I had. But again, I go back to my faith. There's a reason why I didn't go down that road. Apart from the fact that it's not something that's people think they might be able to do something, but in reality, you bottled it, couldn't go through with it. But obviously, I was not meant to go through with it. But they're the kind of things that people think about in terms of when you're in a hole with nowhere to turn. What can you do? And for some people, it's too much. That pressure, that anxiety, and that stress, and the depression that people are going through. For some, unfortunately, is too much, because we are all built differently. That's what I was saying before. We are all built differently. Some are more resilient than others. Some have a bit more mental strength than others. If someone's on their own with no support whatsoever, no brothers and sisters, no mum and dad or whatever, then it's going to be very difficult to go through something like that all alone. So yeah, I can understand why we've got to a point today, in this gambling space where people are losing their lives. I can totally understand that.
And I think, as you say it there, is even when you don't have that support network and people are away from each other, they don't have those relationships, etc. For a lot of young players, when they're moving away from home because of these scholarships or they're being put up in digs, etc., they might be like, right, I'm only earning X amount of money per week, or suddenly I've got an opportunity to get into this, or there's gambling, or there's access to this. But then they are away from those close networks to be able to go home and speak to their mum, dad, family, or whatever around them, and therefore they're on digs, they're with older, lads, older people around them, and therefore it's quite easy to access that lifestyle, to go out partying, drinking. Suddenly they start to enjoy what it is because it's fulfilling that gap whereby they're lacking those relationships of what they're so used to in that home, and it can have an adverse effect on them, and therefore it can create that compulsion, that addiction, that commitment towards what gambling is, because they're enjoying that lavish lifestyle because they want to be part of it.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely young people, like I say, young people that are away in digs, young people on first year contracts. I remember talking to, Tottenham, in 2012, and, we didn't mention names, but I remember Les and Tim Sherwood talking to me about, certain players is right from the club, young players that are getting first year contracts, they're on, because remember, these young players they still have the same mates. So whatever they were doing before they, got a scholarship, they'll do the same things. They've got their mates are the same. So they're straight away, instead of going down to Witherspoons for a couple of hours, their mate, they're off down in London, the bright lights of the big clubs because they're on £5,000 a week all of a sudden. So these young players are very vulnerable in terms of, they're more at risk in terms of, getting into serious financial harm when they're on X amount of money at such a young age. So like you say, when you're away from home, that only exacerbates in terms of the culture and the environment they're living in. They're away from prying eyes, they're away from their parents, their parents don't know what they're getting up to, and they can fall into that category of the buzz and the adulation or the adrenaline rush that comes with being, in that environment, that sort of, high life environment. So, yeah, it can be very risky for young players without a shadow of a doubt. And that's why I think that there has to be, a lot more education awareness, from definitely from the scholars upwards, without a shadow of a doubt, about how, a problem with gambling can, it can spiral out of control and it can ruin your life at a young age. Because then also we've got to think about how it impacts on their performances, which is another issue.
And obviously it had effect on you mentally in terms of that physical state as well, because you're suffering depression, you're becoming ill from it, you're having these anxious opportunities where you're experiencing it, and therefore it is playing a part in training, in the games, in the performance that you had. And therefore, once you were going through that and the experience of, maybe a dip in form, did that become apparent in terms of those experiences that you had on the pitch to others around you in that professional environment at that time?
Yeah, I remember on probably 3 or 4 occasions, whether it was Lou Macari or whether it was Alan Ball, in particular these two, because I'm talking about Stoke, but the same happened at, Lane or with Pat Oran, and if they were sitting here now, they would tell you exactly the same thing, that they couldn't quite work out, why I was the way I was in terms of sporadic form. 1 week I'll be out of this world, man of the match, champagne, all that. The next week I'll be a different player. And it used to tear their hair out. Tell you that. Oh, it's incredible. And I think back to it now, and I think to myself, God, yeah, I wonder what as a manager, what you'd be going through when you've got a player like that. That you can't rely on for consistency. That's for sure. And so yeah, for me, the form, the poor performances and all that, and the sporadic form was just something that stayed with me throughout the 8 odd years that I was a pro. I think Berry was probably the most consistent. I think Force scored quite a few goals, and Berry and had a reasonable, consistent playing. But generally throughout my career, it's been in and out the side, in and out the side of the most of the clubs. That's why I was gone on loan 2 or 3 times. So managers, they never. It's a strange one, even though they couldn't work out what was wrong. I suppose there was times where I'm sitting in the office of Lou Macari, what's going on? What's going on with you, sort of thing. But there wasn't a question about gambling, and I didn't open up about gambling. So it's twofold, because I could say there's an opportunity here for you to, lay your cards on the table and let people know what's going on in your life. But I've said it many times before, as a problem gambler, the one thing we stay in is stay in denial. And the shame aspect of it is just too much. So I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell managers what I was going through. I couldn't tell managers I'm going to get the car repossessed and all that stuff. So really, really difficult. So you can't blame any manager's doors because, you know, within that football culture back then, gambling was just normal. Just normal. It was, never mind being normal to the players. It was normal to managers and directors and chairman. You know, joining in card schools. It's just crazy when you think about it. But that's how it was. It was just a normal professional football, gambling go hand in hand, and they always have them. It's right back to George Best and Roger Marsh. So that's just the way it was. And you know, and although it's slightly changed now, but still the culture of gambling football is still the same, but on a different sort of level, I suppose, in terms of secrecy, in terms of not right being in your face. You know, they're not going to get card scores on Arsenal coach or Man United coach or whatever. It's not going to happen. But yeah, in other ways.
And denial is such an important concept there, as you say, because especially in a professional game where you are at that point, you're like, I've got to compete with these. How can I go and admit that I've got an addiction to this, or this is an opportunity of a threat? Because they might harness on that in a professional game, because it can be that sort of situation whereby those are trying to push to get in the team before you, or they're trying to get picked over you. And I have experienced it in football as a coach, and what I've seen is that people will step over others and utilise a threat opportunity to try and progress themselves. So it is easier to stay in denial in that sense, but it is as well as sort of a situation that you want to try and avoid or not come out and say, because it's quite hard to admit to it. And when you didn't admit that denial at that point, when was the time that you first came about opening up, when you wanted to share that you are a gambling addict and what you were going through?
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So I finished football 2000, went to Network Rail for 10 years. And obviously still gambling, but obviously wages are different. I've accumulated all the debt. Bankruptcy comes in 2009/10. So the next 3 years, I was obviously still gambling, but not as much, because obviously I didn't have the funds. I had loads of debt, etc. Obviously couldn't get funds because of the bankruptcy for 6 years, etc. So yeah, there just came a time where me and my sister were talking about stuff and about footballers putting things in the press, snippets in the press. I remember one in particular name around that time was Michael Chopra, and so I thought, okay, so one or two people are talking about it. It was her idea that maybe I should think about putting something to print. And this is where, because the reason why I'm saying I'm pausing is because you might be thinking, okay, so it's 2013, so why is it going public now? But 3 years earlier is the episode I had with the chaplain at the Network Rail signal box when they came to visit me in 2010. And that visit from the Network Rail chaplain on a Sunday was out the blue, came from nowhere, because I'd never, ever had a visit from a chaplain in the 10 years I was there. But he came on that particular day in 2009 and brought his Bible and talked about where I am. I'm just about to go through the bankruptcy. I'm just about to split up my long-term relationship. My life is a mess, etc., etc. So those 2 hours with the local chaplain didn't mean anything on that particular day. But what it done, it made me think. It gave me a bit of hope. It gave me a salvation prayer. I started to read it through scriptures, get a bit closer to God, and try to regain the faith. It was a very, very slow, gradual thing to the point of 2013, where my belief that initial divine intervention from 2009 with that chaplain and regaining my faith, that was the building block slowly to this point where now you're ready. Something within me told me that you're now ready. Now you're ready to go public. And so that's why I say it stems from that divine intervention in 2009 and signal box. So went obviously wrote a book with Red Card, which I never thought in a million years I could do. And no, I'm happy to say no ghostwriting, none of this nonsense, just A4 paper and a biro. And I wrote for 18 months. Had a manuscript so high, and yeah, my sister said, "Look, let's put it on the publishers out there." It got published 2014, Red Card, and that was because with the publication came a media support. So that meant it was going out to the national media, which meant that I had the opportunity to go on BBC Breakfast. Now that was the biggest step forward in terms of opening up, in terms of owning it, in terms of family and friends, and obviously the nation. That was the biggest step, where now I'm ready to go public. I'm ready to tell people my story, and that's what I done. That's what I did by going on the Recent Breakfast.
And having watched that interview and having seen the current
I
work,
watched it.
yeah, of course
Yeah,
I did. Had to put some into it. I was like, oh,
yeah.
this is great. And there was one interview which which I was watching, and you gave a shout out to Amy Construction, I believe it was at the time, and I was like, I know someone straight away who works for that company, and I just texted them before you come on. I said, I got someone coming on the pod tonight. They shout out to your company at the time. I was like, here's a little shout out for you as well. So, but yeah, definitely watch the interviews, mate. And but it's an incredible way to share the story, and it can be so hard as well because whilst you're out sharing your own personal story, in the mix of that, you obviously have your family surrounding you, but you know your daughter as well. For example, in that press is going to come questions for her, is going to come questions from her own friends, and even though it's not her experience in terms of her gambling, it is her experience of what her dad went through. It's her experience of what he's going through now, and to be part of that can sort of be difficult to come out and say it, and you want to be, and sometimes it can be easy to stride because you're like impacts on my family, etc. But to come out and have that support, to have that network, to share what you're doing, and to come out and share the important messages which you are, that is a huge, again, another achievement within itself, and that success in terms of success from one of the most harrowing situations anyone could ever be in.
Yeah, and I think we go back to what I was saying about all of us being, made up differently in terms of mentally, psychologically, physically. And so it did take a lot of mental strength, did take a lot of courage. It wasn't easy. But I think the fact that I had the family support again and encouraging me to do it, even because obviously they know exactly what I've been through. And they saw that as this is part of your recovery. If you can get out there and share your story and build something and raise awareness and help other people, then it's going to help you as well. So I think that's where they were coming from in terms of family support. And it was just, I think the one thing it told me for sure, 100%, the one thing that came out of going public on Women's Breakfast was the fact that I then, one, realised how big gambling addiction is within the UK and globally. But I also then realised that I'm not alone. And I think that was the thing that really struck out, because the amount of contacts after that, in terms of emails and phone calls, etc., that's when I realised, wow, this is a lot bigger than I originally thought, and you're not alone here. So, yeah, and that's what I think prompted me to do something more after the book was published.
And now, as an advocate, or as someone who's experienced this, as someone who facilitates, as an educator, someone who's part of those groups, societies, and goes out to have the impact on groups, from a perspective that you have and being a footballer yourself and being a professional in terms of the work that you do now, do you think there is greater regulation needed for footballers, or do you think it's a certain amount of regulation but with a wider context on what you're doing in terms of the education and support that is put in place? Because it's quite easy to say, right, we'll ban all these players if they start betting, but then suddenly if you've got young players 18, 19, 20 ban, and they get a ban straight away and they're not accessing wages, what's easy for them to turn to? Oh, right, they got access to these groups, and therefore crime starts to increase. We see a drop off of footballers, and therefore it's easy then to release them, and therefore they're into the crime world because we've banned them straight away without educating them. So, what is your thoughts and perspectives in that prospect?
Yeah, and I think that's a really tricky one in terms of sanctions for players. When we're talking about whether it's breaching betting rules, whatever it is, or you go to a club, whether it's a professional club or a non-league club, and they say, right, anyone caught gambling, that's your contract cancelled. Because there is that danger of throwing people on the scrap heap, and there is that danger of putting people on a different pathway. So yeah, I think it's something that has to be balanced, and I think the only way you can sort of balance, people getting their young lives ruined by getting 3-4 year bans, whatever it is, and serious sanctions and throwing them out, on the scrap heap, is to make sure that and this is why I say this is going to scholarships, and maybe from 11 years old, because we did the secondary schools where players have to seriously, clubs, players, staff, everyone has to be seriously educated about gambling-related harms, about what it means, about what it looks like. Really focus, I think, on the lived experience. I think that's worked well for us where we go. You wouldn't believe the amount of references we get, because it's when you talk about lived experience, this is people that they want to listen to people like the water shoes. So education awareness is massive, because I keep thinking about the scholars that are signed at 16 and dreams and hopes of getting a professional contract at 18. And depending on obviously what club you're at, but you could quite easily be on £5 a week when you turn 18, depending on what club you're at. And if you're not educated, if you don't know absolutely everything about, problem gambling, where it can take you, you've seen case studies, you've known this, you know that, you know how the industry works, you know about, how operators work, for instance, everything, then that's more likely that you're not going to get involved in gambling. But as I said before, unfortunately for some, we can't say that just because someone's been to an educational workshop and been educated on gambling-related harms, that when they get to 18, 19, and their mates say, let's go down to the casino tonight, that they're not going to be drawn in. So we can't say that for sure, but at least it will give them a better opportunity to make better informed decisions about whether they're going to get involved in gambling.
And if you had someone who was starting to become addicted to gambling, or was falling into a route that you could recognize, but you would say, right, from my experience, here are 5 steps, which is what you need to start looking towards, or what you could deploy. What 5 steps would they be for someone accessing gambling or falling down to that route, for example?
I think the first step, because we talk about 5 steps of recovery, and I think the first step, if someone's struggling with gambling, you have to acknowledge it. You have to acknowledge you've got a problem, and you will have. Generally, you will have friends or a family member or cousin that might be talking to you about gambling and giving you advice and saying, "Oh, John, be careful with the gambling. They might be borrowing money off your cousins and friends." So with people that know you've got a problem with gambling, and they'll giving you some friendly advice. But I didn't listen to my brothers, I didn't listen to my sister, I didn't listen to mum and dad. So we stay in denial, as I said, and you're chasing, you think the big wins coming, etc. So it's a mental health gambling disorder, which is very difficult to stop. So the only way to stop is you've got to accept it and acknowledge it, and then you've got to seek help as quickly as possible. And the thing about seeking help is that you've got to really want it. So you might get advice from different people. You might be in debt, etc. And you might think to yourself, "Oh, I want to win that money back," etc. But what's more important, stopping after 6 months, whatever, than as opposed to 6 years and losing everything. So, you've got to really be strong mentally, really take people's advice on board, accept it, acknowledge it, and seek help. And then whatever the recovery looks like is going to be different for everybody. I always say that lots of different avenues for recovery, not one size fits all. Some people will go to GA. Mine was counselling and support and faith. Some people will go on residential treatments if they need it and go away for 12 weeks, for instance, where it's called a Moody or other organisations. So there's different ways to recover. And I've seen the different ways with my team, who are all different in terms of their recovery journey. So it's not like there isn't, a platform out there and a pathway for recovery for people. It's out there. But the first thing you've got to do is acknowledge. You've got to hold your hands up and say, "Look, okay, I've got a problem. I'm impacting other people as well. I want to get this sorted," but really from the heart, really want to change. And that is not easy, but that's my advice. You have to really want to change.
Absolutely. I think that's being that want to change and want to do something has an intrinsic value within that. And that is not always a push factor, but sometimes it's a pull needed. But once you start to educate and support people and create that network around them, and there may be an opportunity where that network isn't sophisticated or developed enough. And therefore, that once you start admitting it and starting to come out with it, you can certainly develop that want which comes into it. But it takes a lot of work, and it's quite easy to say, especially when I think of some of the people that I work with, just to go, "Yeah, oh, that's fine," or "Yeah, that's okay," or not to completely understand the situations which they're going through. But once you start to understand it and start to layer it even more, you go, right, there's actual work which is needed here. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen in the next week, month. It might take 5 years. It might take 6 years. So, for example, when you said in early 2000, when you retired and worked for Network Rail and Bang 2009, that opportunity came around. That's a 9-year period whereby you're still experiencing different situations. And 9 years is a long time within itself.
Yeah. And that's why you get I'll call it ignorance, but I understand there's thousands of people that don't, understand and appreciate, a gambling disorder, and they say, "Oh, you're losing X amount of money, why don't you just stop?" But obviously, we know with addictions, you can't just stop. I could have just wake up in the morning and decide, okay, I'm in a lot of debt, I've done this, I'm going to stop. because it's an addiction. That's what addiction does. So that's why you do need professional help. And whatever professional help that is, that's what you've got to see. So I look back to that going public in 2013, and yeah, that was my time. That was my time. Yeah, obviously a lot of family support, a bit of counselling. And my counselling, it was just private counselling, it wasn't just about the gambling. It was about life. It was about hope. It was about the future. It was about a number of things. It wasn't just about the gambling. And obviously I go back to it a lot. But, the family support has been huge for me, luckily enough for me. And obviously, my faith has been another part of it. So there's three sort of elements to my recovery. And I think achievement-wise, in terms of, because people ask me about, in terms of the last few years, the last 7 or 8 years, what you're more proud of. And I think something that's brought home to me over the last couple of years is that I think back to the bankruptcy. I think back because I've still got my bankruptcy file, and I'm still getting out now and again and look at all the creditors, and there's just close to 30 creditors in terms of payday loans and credit cards and all the rest of it. Remortgages, there's loads on there, and I just think, so wow, that's the kind of debt I was in, and you're looking at 0, 0, 0s, and you're thinking, wow, this isn't believable. And so I was looking at clear score not so long ago, and looking at my credit, and it used to be about 200 or something stupid, with 8 defaults and 8 CTJs and blah blah. And I was looking at it, I think it was like 880 or something, and I thought, wow, no missed payments 5 years, no CTJ, no defaults, no this, no that. And I thought, wow, never ever thought in a million years that I'd be debt free, not in a million years. So I think for me, and obviously running the organisation and having a big part to play in terms of the financial side of running the organisation, it's just amazing that I never thought I'd be able to do that. But I think that's the sort of biggest achievement for me.
Absolutely. And even when you do stack up, say, maybe some considerations of what you might consider failures, or the most harrowing experiences, and they can stack up, for example, debt levels, bankruptcy, maybe not achieving the levels that you wanted as a professional footballer, break up a relationship, and that could be listed down. You're like, whoa, that is a lot to experience. But for what you've come through, professional footballer, success in terms of the family, making the parents proud, having a family of your own, bringing up a child, being a founder, being free of debt, being a CEO of in itself, setting up a company, educating, impacting, supporting children. The list goes on, and that success, even being an author, being an educator, in terms of what you do, whoa, what a success you've achieved in terms of going right down to the lowest and coming back up and going, yeah, well, springboarded off that was hard, but this is the impact that I'm having now. And mate, what a story that you're certainly having. Incredible stuff, mate, honestly.
Thank you. I mean, I was at GamStop's anniversary not so long ago. GamStop being a prevention tool for those that don't know, in terms of supporting your gambling. Sign up to GamStop, I'll give them a plug anyway. But their anniversary at the House of Commons, and those things themselves, and this, I think it was the third time I've been to the House of Commons and socialised with different organisations and charities. And I just pinched myself and say, it's just great to be recognised in this space for what, I say myself, but the team have achieved in terms of Red Card. And that's what I want to continue. I want to leave that legacy that Red Card are a big part of education awareness. When I leave this planet, that's the kind of legacy I want to leave. And hopefully, we really, really continue to reach as many people as we can. But, you are right in terms of I pinched myself about how, I got to where I am today as opposed to 2013. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Incredible.
And they have Red Card, and you're offering gambling support, education workshops, and other intricacies which are available towards groups, individuals, etc. Is there anything else you'd like to share on part of your story, your podcast, Tony?
Yes, I'm going to give it a plug, but there's lots of people that will be able to listen to the story, but lots of people prefer to read the story. So Red Card, I Bet You Can Win, is out there, obviously, at Norman outlets and Amazon and Waterstones, etc. And also, in terms of where we go, we are national. So there might be anybody listening out there, whether it's young people, whether it's a community centre, a youth club, whatever it is, corporate dinners, businesses, company, it doesn't matter, because I'm in an office now, it's 5 to 7 o'clock, whatever it is. And when I go out in the afternoon here, outside to talk to different company members, because there's 9 companies here, and I get into the conversation about, I see your office, what do you do? and then just look look on their face, because they're just about to tell me that it's their brother, sister, or mate, or work colleague, and that's all I get, all the time. So we know we're at a place now where generally there'll be someone that knows somebody. So that's why it's important that we want to reach as many people as we can in all different sectors, all different environments, all different professions. So that's I just want people to be aware that Red Card will go anywhere in the country to do that. So, and obviously I do my personal talks. So churches is a massive thing for me, in terms of sharing my story in various churches, just because it's part of, as I said, faith is a big part of my journey.
Absolutely, and the book, I think, is definitely one which I'm supportive of that plug for sure, because it is such a great book, and I'm even happy, as sad as this may sound, the printing of it, the quality, the type of paper mate, just to make notes and the highlights as I read through it, but it is a great book in terms of the story, the actual upbringing and the context behind it. I think, we touch upon it here, and as much you're raising awareness, and much more will come out in terms of the workshops and work that you do, not to give away the entire basis across every podcast, but the book is certainly there for anyone to read and understand, because it will build upon what you can access Tony on all the podcasts for, every story that is out there as well. But certainly, as you can read the book and get him out to your organisation for you to listen to him, I certainly support that plug massively, and he has been such a wonderful individual guest, and someone who has done so much, as we highlighted a few minutes ago, in terms of what he's doing. But Tony, it's been wonderful to have you on. I hope I finished within the time frame that you wanted as well, but it's certainly been great to speak to you, and I love how easy this was to organise. But you certainly got a week to go, and then it's off to the Caribbean for some Christmas sun, mate.
Yeah, well, Luke, I want to say thank you for this giving the opportunity on this platform, because as you know, I love sharing my story. Another great platform. I'm sure we'll talk again. Yeah,
absolutely.
And, I'm off to the Caribbean to see them on Wednesday. Yeah.
Well, that's it. Take care, enjoy, mate, and best wishes to her, and enjoy, mate.
Thanks a lot, Luke. All the best, mate.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Yeah, I think it's more for me. It's more. I've generally surrounded myself. I've been one of them people that surround myself with sort of good people and close friends. I wasn't really one of them that had like 8, 9, 10 people around me all the time. Yeah, throughout the football world, you get, as you point out, a little hangers on now and again that are around for the drinks and the parties and all that stuff. But in terms of close, genuine friends, I've always had close, genuine friends, and they have stayed with me, to this day. But there's also been one or two where, due to the, obviously the lies and the deceit, along that gambling addiction journey, that I've obviously, fallen away. So I've lost, probably 3 or 4 really good friends that, unfortunately I let down. So that can be sad, because there were some really good people that were in my life that unfortunately are not now, due to what I was going through. As I said, when there's only so much lies and deceit that some people can take, you let people down and betray them. So that's happened, and I have to hold my hand up to that and own that. And in terms of, the lady you're talking about, I think one of the reasons why, she's never really judged me. She's understood. Obviously, she is my daughter's mother. She's never, all the stuff that we've been through together, she's never, like fallen out with big time. They want to speak to you again, blah, blah, blah. She's been a bit of a rock, and that's why I hold in high esteem. And today we're best friends. She's been, I think, because we met so young, she's been through the whole journey, the whole football world journey, and everything, the whole addiction world. So she gets it, she understands it, and has never really judged me on it. Yeah.